The envoy's name was Dallas. He had done this 17 times. 17 planets. 17 rooms. 17 governments that sat behind long tables with their hands folded and their faces the color of old paper. He knew exactly what a civilization looked like when it understood it had already lost. He had memorized the shape of that particular surrender. The way shoulders dropped. The way voices went small. The way the men who signed the agreements couldn't look at the men who handed them the pen. He walked into the diplomatic station above Earth and expected the same thing. The room was wrong. No long table. No row of pale officials sitting behind name placards. No pressed suits, no advisors whispering into ears, no water glasses being refilled by nervous hands. Just a single chair. A single woman in it. A cup of tea on the armrest that had gone cold. She hadn't touched it in the 37 minutes he had been made to wait outside. Admiral Gion looked at him the way a person looks at something they have been expecting for a very long time. Not with surprise. Not with fear. With something that was almost recognition. She was not what he had prepared for. The intelligence files his office maintained on Earth's military command describe her as a mid-level administrator elevated by political vacancy after the Europa restructuring. Cautious. Conservative. The kind of officer who survived by staying quiet and small. The files had never mentioned her hands. They were completely still in her lap. Dallas straightened his formal sash, activated the declaration scroll, and began. The Galactic Compact's war declaration was 22 minutes long. It had been authored by 6 senior orators and reviewed by the full diplomatic chamber. It outlined humanity's repeated violations of colonial resource accords in precise legal language. It described Earth's failures in terms so carefully worded they almost sounded like concern. It explained what cooperation now would mean and what resistance would cost. On 16 prior occasions it had produced capitulation before the 14-minute mark. Gion listened. She did not shift in her chair. She did not fold her arms or press her lips together or do any of the small physical things people did when they were frightened and trying not to show it. Her eyes stayed on Dallas with the steady, patient attention of someone watching rain come down. Not waiting for it to stop, just watching. At minute 9, a small draft from the station's ventilation moved the surface of her tea. She did not look at it. Dallas reached the declaration's closing section. His voice carried the full ceremonial weight the compact required for these moments. The final lines had been constructed to land like something being sealed shut. A door closing. The sound of a decision already made on behalf of people who were not in the room. He finished. Silence. Gion tilted her head slightly. "There's a cup for you as well," she said. She nodded toward a small side table near the door where a second cup had been set. "They prepared it when you arrived. It's probably cold now too." Dallas blinked. "I'm not going to drink mine," she said. "You might as well have yours." "Admiral." He kept his voice even. This was a trained skill and he was using all of it. "I require Earth's formal response to the declaration of the Galactic Compact." She looked at him. Not at the scroll in his hands. Not at the formal compact insignia on his sash. At him. The look was not hard and it was not soft. It was the look of someone who had made a decision so long ago that the act of making it no longer had any weight. She stood up. One smooth motion. She pressed both palms down the front of her jacket, a single slow straightening, top to bottom, and then she was still. "Finally," she said. Dallas waited for the rest of the sentence. He waited 4 full seconds. Which is a long time, in a silent room, when you are a man who has delivered this document 17 times and never once had to wait for anything after it. "You have 6 hours to clear Earth's orbital corridor," Gion said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been for the entire conversation. "After that window, we will clear it ourselves." She picked up a data pad from the arm of the chair, held it briefly, then set it down. "My staff will show you out." 2 officers appeared in the doorway. Young. Unhurried. They didn't reach for him or gesture. They simply stood in the frame, and the room arranged itself in a way that left no interpretation other than that the meeting had ended. Dallas walked to the shuttle. He filed his report during the return transit. His hands were not fully steady while he typed, and he noticed this several times. He couldn't account for it. She had not raised her voice. She had not issued threats in any form he had been trained to recognize as threatening. She had said one word. She had told him to leave. His commanding officer received the report and replied in under 5 minutes. Proceed to deployment. First wave authorized. Fleet Admiral Tessar received the same report. She did not reply for 13 minutes. She had read hundreds of capitulation assessments in her career. She understood fear's structure. Desperation had its own signature. Even genuine resistance, rare as it was, moved a certain way. Hot. Unsteady. Loud. Finally moved none of those ways. She pulled Earth's complete strategic profile. She read the military capacity section. Then the resource allocation logs. Then the colonial infrastructure reports her analysts had marked low priority and filed away 3 years ago without follow-up. She closed the file. She opened it again. She read the word one more time. Finally. Tessar set the report down on her desk. She did not call her staff. She sat alone at her command station and let herself feel the thing she had not felt in 22 years of service. Something almost like unease. On the station above Earth, Jion stood at the long viewport in the outer corridor. Earth's nightside filled the glass below her, dark and enormous, cities burning quiet across the surface like scattered embers of something that had never gone out. Wu Jin appeared beside her. He had been in the adjacent room for the entire meeting. He had heard all of it. He didn't say good job. He didn't ask if she was ready. He had known her long enough to know that asking the question now would be an insult to every one of the 11 years behind them. Ironwake, he said. Jion watched the lights of Earth for one more breath. Wake it, she said. The asteroid belt had a name in the compact survey logs. Sector 7 Gamma, Resource Classification D, marked depleted and filed without further interest 14 years ago. That had been the plan. Harry remembered the first time she saw the place. A 6-hour transit in a stripped-down mining shuttle with no windows worth looking through and a pilot who spoke maybe 40 words the entire journey. She had a single datapad, a thermos of coffee, and the particular kind of tired that came from 3 weeks of not knowing what she had just said yes to. The shuttle bay doors opened on the inside of asteroid 7G11. It was not empty. The cavern was the size of a small city, carved out by years of quiet work. The lighting was industrial and cold. There were no decorations, no banners, no administrative anything. Just scaffolding, hull plates, power conduits running through carved rock like veins in something alive. The bones of a very large thing taking shape in the dark. Harry stood in the bay door and looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at Jion, who had been standing beside her the whole time. How much of the budget is real? Harry asked. All of it, Jion said. The compact just doesn't know it exists. That had been 9 years ago. The thing about building a secret fleet inside a rock that the galaxy had already decided was not worth looking at was that it required a specific kind of person. Not brilliant in the way universities valued. Not theoretical or elegant. Brilliant in the way a bridge is brilliant. Load-bearing. Practical. The kind of person who looked at a problem and thought not how do I solve this but how do I solve this so it holds under the worst possible conditions . Harry was that kind of person. She had spent 9 years building Ironfleet's nervous system, a distributed command network that would allow Earth's entire fleet to move and respond as one organism. Every ship talking to every other ship in real time. No central command node that could be cut and used to collapse the whole structure. The network had no head. Sever one part and the rest rerouted automatically. Like water finding its way. Like something that refused to die from a single wound. It was the most complicated thing she had ever built. It was held together in one place by a relay node she had installed during Year 6 on tolerances that weren't quite right, because the correct parts hadn't arrived and she'd had a decision to make and she had made it. She had documented it once in a subreport that nobody ever read, and then spent the following 3 years checking it every 6 hours during operational tests. It held every time. She checked it every 6 hours anyway. Across the belt, in 16 other caverns inside 16 other rocks the compact surveys had marked and forgotten, the same work was happening at different scales. Shipyards built where no shipyards were supposed to exist. Engineers working in shifts under rock, eating cafeteria food, sending encrypted messages home to families who had been told they were on long mining contracts. Pilots running combat drills in craft that had no entry in any compact database because no compact intelligence officer had ever thought to look here. Wu Jin had been the one to explain the full logic of it. He had stood in Jion's planning room in Year 2, a whiteboard covered in intersecting lines and numbers, and laid it out in the flat, precise way he laid out everything. They watched us grieve, he said. Europa Station. The colony seizures. Every resource accord they pushed through. They watched the protests, the memorials, the public broadcasts. They watched us suffer in public and wrote it down as evidence of passivity. He uncapped a marker. They were not watching what we did with our hands. Jion had said nothing. She was already looking at the next board. The compact psychological profile of humanity, compiled after the Europa pacification and Marx standard classification, had described humans as expressive in suffering and passive in resistance. It recommended standard colonial oversight protocols. No elevated threat assessment. No long-range military preparedness review. It had been written by a very intelligent person who had looked at entirely the wrong things. Wu Jin read sections of it aloud sometimes, during late planning sessions. Not to mock it. Just carefully, the way you read something that shows you the exact shape of what another person cannot see. Daeho, who was usually present during these sessions, never found it funny either. He found it useful. Sora had come on board in year 5. She was 26, already the best pilot Earth had in a generation, and she walked into her first briefing, looked at the tactical map spread across the planning table, and asked one question. How long have you been building this? Long enough, Jion said. Sora looked at the map a little while longer. Then she sat down and didn't ask again. The fleet Ironwake built was not the largest in the quadrant. It was not designed to be. It was designed to fight the specific war that Jion had been planning since the day she wrote a single word on a paper napkin at a budget meeting 11 years ago and folded it into her pocket without saying anything. Asterisk enough. Asterisk. Not someday. Not when conditions improved. Just that single word, written under the table where no one could see, and then 11 years of building toward what it meant. The night Ironwake activated, Harry was at her primary station in Cavern 7G11. She watched a power board she had stared at during 1,000 test runs and 200 full simulations. Green lights climbing. 1 gauge, then 3, then the full board. 17 facilities across the belt coming online at the same moment, all connected through her network, all alive, all talking to each other, all holding. She sat down. She put both palms flat on the edge of the console. Held them there. It held, she said. The room was full of engineers who had spent years building the same thing. None of them cheered. None of them made a sound. They were all watching their own boards do the same thing, every screen going green at once, and the silence in the room had a texture to it, the texture of something too large and too long in the making to be met with anything as small as noise. Outside the rock, in the cold dark between worlds, 17 shipyard doors opened for the first time. The fleet came out. It moved into the dark without ceremony, without announcement, without any signal the compact's listening posts were equipped to receive. Hundreds of ships that did not officially exist, built in places that were not on any map, crewed by people whose deployment records were buried under 9 years of administrative misdirection. Harry watched the last position lights disappear from her board. She checked the provisional node. It held. She made a note in her log, closed the maintenance file, and went to find something to eat. The cafeteria was still open. It was always open. That had been one of her requirements when she took the job, and it was the one Jion had agreed to fastest, which told her something about the kind of people who were going to be doing this work. People who ran on cold coffee and correct tolerances and the knowledge that the thing they had built in the dark was finally, after all of it, moving toward the light. The compact's advance fleet arrived at Mars in perfect formation. This was doctrine. The compact had refined its engagement approach across 40 conquests. Come in heavy, come in ordered. Let the sheer size of the formation do the psychological work before a single shot was fired. By the time most civilizations finished calculating what they were looking at, they were already negotiating. Sora watched them on her tactical display and felt the breath go out of her slowly. There it was. She had grown up looking at Mars through the small porthole of her family's transport ship. Red-brown and enormous, turning in the dark. Her brother had said it looked like a rusted coin someone dropped and forgot about. She had thought that was the best description of anything she had ever heard. He was 12 when he said it. She was 9. He had been at Europa Station. She filed that behind a door in the back of herself, the same door she always used, and turned her attention to the display. 9 Squadron, she said into her comm on my lead. 31 ships behind her went to ready. The compact's vanguard, 60 warships moving in a textbook advance formation, had not yet registered them. Sora's craft were too small to trip standard long-range scans at this distance, and they were running without active signatures, tucked in behind the Mars shadow. Harry had built the signal dark systems. Wu Jin had identified the scan blind spot. Sora had agreed to fly through it and spent 4 months learning every centimeter of the geometry. She waited until the Vanguard's lead ships crossed the outer navigation marker, a point she had memorized until it lived in her body rather than in any system. Now, she said. 32 ships came out of the dark. What followed was not a dogfight. A dogfight was two forces meeting with room to react. This was not that. Sora's squadron punched into the compact formation before it could organize a response, splitting the Vanguard into 3 separate clusters and pushing the largest of them along a vector she had been designing for 4 months. Not a fighting line, a funnel, built out of speed and geometry and the simple fact that the compact pilots had never faced anything that moved the way she moved. They were good pilots. She knew that going in. Their response time was fast, their formation discipline was tight, and within 90 seconds they were adapting, trying to collapse back into a unified line. She didn't let them. Her hands on the controls were the hands of a person doing something practiced past the point of thought. Every adjustment was small. Every change in direction was deliberate. She wasn't fighting them. She was moving them, the way you move water by changing where the banks are, and the largest cluster of compact ships came around onto the vector she needed without ever understanding why it felt like their own idea. The largest cluster crossed into a grid that was not empty. IRONWAK's mine network, listed in the compact's own navigation database 4 years ago as a civilian debris mitigation array, a navigational hazard marker, non-military, not worth a second look, lit up. 31 compact warships went dark in 11 minutes. Sora pulled up and clear. She ran her board. Squadron status, all present, 2 ships with minor hull stress, none critical. Next wave, she said. The second wave was 5 times larger. She had known it would be. She had planned for it. She had also understood, in the quiet part of herself that dealt in honest assessments rather than confidence, that knowing a thing on paper and watching 400 new contacts appear on your display were 2 different experiences. She exhaled once. Slow and controlled. The second engagement lasted 3 hours. It was nothing like the first. The compact second wave came in already broken into smaller units, already refusing to cluster, already adapted by someone on their command side who had watched the first 11 minutes and drawn the right conclusions fast. Sora was faster. She flew 3 hours without rest. Her back hurt. Her eyes hurt. 40 minutes in, her targeting system's secondary display glitched, a flicker and then nothing, and she flew the next 4 minutes on primary visual and sector geometry alone, working from the map she had built in her own memory over months of preparation. Her instructors in training had told her this was theoretically possible. They had also said it wasn't practically reliable. Both things turned out to be true and she did it anyway. Midway through hour 2, her flight path took her over Europa Station's debris field. Still there. Would always be there. The compact had not cleared it because clearing debris was an admission that something had happened there worth acknowledging. So they left it where it fell, hundreds of thousands of tons of what used to be a place where people lived, turning in the same slow orbit it had been turning in for 7 years. She didn't slow down. She didn't speed up. She flew through it on a straight line with completely steady hands and her eyes fixed on the contacts ahead, and the door in the back of herself stayed shut the way she had built it to stay shut, and she came out the other side and kept flying. On Gion's command ship, the engagement maps showed exactly what they were supposed to show. Every compact contact moving along projected vectors. Every human unit holding or advancing inside planned parameters. Wu Jin stood at the display calling numbers and Gion was 3 calculations ahead of each one before he finished the sentence. 20 minutes into the second engagement, the compact's eastern flank made a push that was not in any of the modeled scenarios. It was fast thinking by whoever ordered it, sharp, unexpected, aimed at the weakest coordinate in the human line. Gion looked at it for 5 seconds. She rerouted 2 reserve wings, issued 3 targeting adjustments, and shifted the eastern defensive line by 11 degrees. The push collapsed before it had room to develop. Tessara has taken direct command of their fleet, Wu Jin said. I know, Gion said. He glanced at her. You say that like it's good news. She's the only one worth answering, Gion said. When the second engagement ended, the compact's forward force had lost 40% of its advance fleet. The human fleet had not lost a single ship. Daeho's ground report from Titan came in an hour later. 4 lines. Ground engagement completed. Compact garrison withdrawn. Colonial administration returned to local authority. The 4th line read, *clean. One word. That was how Daeho wrote things. In the wreckage field outside Mars, Sora brought her ship in on final approach and did not speak on comms until her landing gear was down. She sat in the cockpit for a moment. The display was still lit. Contact markers still dotted the board, friendly green across the map. The secondary targeting display was still dark. She made a note to tell maintenance. Then she unstrapped, climbed out of the seat, and went to find something to eat. The hangar smelled like engine heat and recycled air and the specific kind of exhaustion that came from doing the thing you trained to do for years and having it work the way you trained it to work. She didn't say anything to the pilots she passed. They didn't say anything to her either. They had all been in the same sky. They all understood what the silence was for. The war was 19 days old when Tessara asked for a direct channel. Not a surrender channel. Not a ceasefire inquiry. A direct command-to-command communication, flagged personal and off the formal diplomatic record. She had written the request twice before sending it. That was unlike her. She was not a woman who rewrote things. Jiyeon read it once and told Woojin to open the line. They spoke for 40 minutes. Tessara had a voice lower than Jiyeon expected. Steady, precise, built by decades of giving orders in difficult rooms and having them followed. She opened without any formal address. That told Jiyeon something about her before the first sentence was finished. "I've been trying to find your mistake," Tessara said. 3 weeks. "I can't find it." "There isn't one," Jiyeon said. Then, after a moment, there was almost one. She looked across the room at Harry, who was bent over a console with her back to the conversation. Tessara couldn't see the look. It didn't matter. "How did you conceal the construction?" Tessara asked. "Our survey teams covered the belt. The reports are in our own archives." "You were watching us grieve," Jiyeon said. "You weren't watching what we did with our hands." Silence on the line. Tessara was smart enough to understand what that meant and honest enough not to pretend otherwise. "The psychological assessments," she said. "Filed after Europa. Your analysts watched the memorial broadcasts, the protests, the public responses. Wrote it all down." Jiyeon paused. They weren't wrong about what they saw. They were wrong about what they missed. Yes. Outside Jiyeon's viewport, 2 patrol wings moved in slow rotation, a standard security pass, unhurried. The war had a shape now, and everyone who had spent years learning it in the dark recognized the shape. It was the shape they had drawn on paper in rooms no one else was allowed to enter. Why not strike earlier? Tessara asked. You had the capacity. 2 years ago, perhaps 3. Jiyeon considered the question. It was an honest one and it deserved a real answer. We needed you to declare first, she said. A longer silence this time. You needed the moral position, Tessara said. We needed our people to know they hadn't started it, Jiyeon said. There's a difference. The line closed 17 minutes later by mutual agreement. Neither of them said goodbye. It was not that kind of conversation. Woo Jin had been listening from across the room with the focused stillness of a man cataloguing everything for later use. When the channel closed, he was quiet for a moment. Then, she's going to recommend ceasefire terms to the Senate. I know, Jiyeon said. That means she's already lost the internal argument. They'll relieve her before she can file the recommendation. I know that too, Jiyeon said. Harry had been at her console during the conversation, running maintenance checks. Routine work, the kind that required enough of her attention to give her hands something to do. 19 days into the war, her network had performed above every projected model. Every relay had held. Every reroute had completed within acceptable time. Except one. On day 7, at 0340 station time, the provisional node, the one she had installed in year 6 on tolerances that weren't quite right, the one she had been checking every 6 hours for 3 years, had failed. A single relay. The failure had lasted 42 minutes before the automated system flagged it and woke her from the 4 hours of sleep she had managed to get. She had fixed it herself, no team, no consultation, in the maintenance corridor of a moving warship with the battle 3 sectors away. 42 minutes. She had timed it. She filed the maintenance report the next morning. In the field marked * cause of failure *, she typed 2 words. * overperformed tolerance. *. She stared at those 2 words for a while. A relay that failed because it had been asked to do more than she had built it to do, and had done it anyway until it couldn't, and had bought 42 minutes of cover while she slept. She had almost told Ji-yeon. She had stood outside the planning room door twice. Both times she went back to her console instead. She fixed the backup relay, confirmed it had held through the outage without degradation, and submitted the report. Then she checked the provisional node one more time, logged the readings, and went back to work. Daeho came back from Titan on day 14. He walked into the briefing room with the same expression he always carried. Open, present, not performing anything. He sat in his usual chair at the back and was quiet through the session. After, when the room had cleared, he stayed. "The colony kids," he said, when Ji-yeon looked at him. She waited. "They're good," he said. "They're okay. They want to know if we are coming back." "Tell them yes," Ji-yeon said. He nodded once. He had already told them yes. The night of day 19, after the second compact push on the outer belt failed and every engagement report confirmed the fleet had held every line, Ji-yeon sent her staff home and sat alone in the planning room. The lights were on half power. The map table was dark. Outside the viewport, the patrol wings turned in their slow, steady loops. She reached into the pocket of her jacket. She had carried it for 11 years. Folded into a small rectangle, refolded so many times along the same creases that the paper had gone soft. She put it on the dark table in front of her. The word on it had faded, but she did not need to read it. She had always known what it said. *enough. Written under a table in a budget meeting while a compact trade administrator explained, for the 3rd consecutive year, why Earth's Outer Colony Infrastructure Fund was being redirected to compact development priorities. She had not raised her hand. She had not spoken. She had written one word on a paper napkin and folded it into her pocket and sat there with it against her palm for the rest of the meeting. She had not thrown it away. 11 years of quiet work. Shipyards built in the dark. Engineers eating cafeteria food under rock. Pilots training in ships that did not officially exist. Survey vessels flying past and filing their reports and never looking twice. Woojin reading enemy assessments aloud in empty rooms. Harry checking a relay node every 6 hours for 3 years. Daeho filing 4-line reports that ended with single clean words. All of it sitting on the table now in a piece of paper the size of a palm. She did not cry. She was too tired and too still. She sat in the half-lit room with a napkin in front of her and let the weight of 11 years be the weight that it was, without moving away from it. Woojin came in at some point. She didn't hear the door. He did not ask what she was doing. He did not say anything at all. He set a cup of tea next to her right hand, not in front of her, not across the table, right there, within reach without her having to move, and left without making a sound. She sat with it a long time before she drank it. It was cold. She drank it anyway. The compact Senate held emergency session on the morning of day 23. The agenda had one item. It had been filed at 0200 hours by a military officer who understood that filing it meant the end of her career and had filed it anyway. The item was 3 words. Proposed. Ceasefire request. It passed by a margin that surprised everyone except Tessar, who had predicted it within 4 votes and told no one. Dallas was given the assignment again. His superiors considered sending someone else and then decided against it. He had been in the room. He knew what the room was. He arrived at Earth's orbital station for the 2nd time in 26 days. Same corridor. Same ventilation hum. Different meeting room, larger, with a proper table, chairs on both sides, and a water carafe that nobody was going to touch. Ji-yeon was already seated. Dallas sat across from her and placed the Senate's ceasefire request on the table. He did not activate any scroll. He did not begin any ceremony. He slid the document across and waited. Ji-yeon read it without touching it. Her eyes moved down the page in the careful, steady way they always moved, taking in and holding what they found. She turned to the 3rd section. "Read it again." "This is not a surrender," she said. "No," Dallas said. "The Senate is requesting negotiated terms." "Yes." She leaned back in her chair. "Good," she said. "So are we." The negotiations took 11 days. Ji-yeon wrote the terms herself, working from a document she had started drafting in year 8 of Ironfleet's construction and revised 6 times since. Wu Jin read the final version and did not change a single word. The terms were not designed to punish. She had been deliberate about this from the beginning. No reparations clauses, no territory transfers, no public humiliation requirements of the kind the compact had imposed on every civilization it had ever brought to the table. Wu Jin had raised it once, early in the drafting process. They'll read the absence of punishment as weakness, he said. Let them, Jian said. The terms don't need to hurt. They need to hold. Each clause removed something structural. Not wealth, not land. Capacity. The right to conduct unilateral survey operations in inhabited systems, removed. The legal framework that permitted resource taxation of non-member civilizations, dissolved. The administrative mechanism the compact had used to justify what it did at Europa Station, taken out root and all, in language so exact it could not be reinterpreted by anyone who came after. Not a wound. A redesign. Tessara signed for the compact on the 11th day of negotiations. She sat in a chair that felt like it had been built for someone slightly larger, at a table in a room that smelled of recycled station air, and she held the pen for a moment before she used it. Her career would end with the signature. She had calculated it as a cost before she filed the ceasefire request. She had paid it anyway. She looked up at Jian across the table. Was there a moment, she said, when you weren't ready? She asked it the way someone asks a question they have been holding for days. Not as a challenge. As the only honest thing left to say. Jian was quiet for a moment. The node, she said. She didn't look at Tessara when she said it. She looked across the room at Harry, who was standing near the back wall with 2 other engineers, reviewing something on a datapad, paying no attention to the table. Tessara followed the look. She saw a woman in an engineer's uniform staring at a screen. She didn't know what that meant. She didn't ask. She signed the document. The official end of hostilities was broadcast across Earth's comm networks at 1,600 hours. In the outer colonies, where signal travel time meant the news arrived later, people sat in common rooms and cafeterias and listened to the words come through with the particular stillness of those who had learned how to wait for things. Sora flew one last pass over Europa Station. She had not planned to. Her return vector didn't require it. She changed it herself, without filing an alteration request, on the morning of the broadcast, and flew the long way home. The debris field turned below her at its slow permanent speed. It would be there for centuries. She had made her peace with that fact, or enough peace to function, which was perhaps the only kind of peace actually available for something like this. She didn't say anything on comms. She turned toward home and flew. Daeho received a transmission 3 days after the ceasefire. It came through the General Colony Communications Relay, addressed to his unit. Inside was a drawing on paper, made by someone very young, unsteady lines, Titan's low-gravity surface in colored pencil, and in the middle of the picture a small fleet of ships heading towards something off the edge of the page. He looked at it for a long time. He pinned it above his bunk, below the first one. Harry filed IRONWAK's final operational report on the morning of day 30. She sat at her station in what had been Cavern 7G11, now a formal naval installation, registered and classified, no longer a secret, and typed the last entry. Facilities status. Fleet status. Network integrity. She moved through each field the same way she had moved through maintenance logs for 9 years. Methodical. Complete. In the field marked asterisk current status, asterisk she typed one word. Asterisk dormant dot asterisk. Not decommissioned. Not retired. Dormant. She submitted the report and sat for a while. She was an engineer. She understood that the galaxy had not gotten smaller. She understood what dormant meant and why she had chosen it over any other word. She checked the provisional node one final time. It held. A journalist came to speak with Jian on the 32nd day. Official record, broadcast clearance, the kind of interview documented and archived and eventually read by people who wrote history. The journalist asked the standard questions first: duration of planning, size of the fleet, projected casualty models against actual outcomes. Jian answered each one in the same measured, direct way she answered all questions. Complete. Economical. Nothing wasted. At the end, the journalist looked up from her notes. For the official record, she said, what did you feel when the compact's declaration was delivered? Jian thought about a napkin. About dark caverns cut into forgotten rock. About Harry's hands pressed flat on a console at 0340 in the morning saying asterisk had held asterisk to no one in particular. About Sora's straight-line flight through debris with completely steady hands. About Daeho's 4-line reports ending in single clean words. About Woojin setting a cup of cold tea next to her hand and leaving without a sound. About 11 years of one word folded into a pocket. Asterisk enough. Asterisk. Finally, she said. The journalist looked up. Could you elaborate on that? Ji-yeon stood. She smoothed the front of her jacket, one slow pass, top to bottom, and walked to the viewport at the end of the room. Below her, Earth turned. Dark on one side, lit on the other. Cities stitched across the surface like something that had been burning quietly for a very long time and had no intention of going out. She watched it for a while. She didn't elaborate.